there, this is Phil Gurski, President and CEO of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Ottawa, Canada, and you're listening to An Intelligent Look at Terrorism, which is a podcast that looks at various aspects of national security, intelligence, and, surprise, surprise, terrorism. You've probably been at an airport or in a large venue. Let's say you're waiting for your luggage at the arrivals hall, and all of a sudden there's a guy walks by with a dog on a leash. And you think, oh, that's interesting. Maybe he brought his dog on the flight, but this dog isn't having a good time. This dog is actually working. And it's what we call, at least what I call, a sniffer dog. It's a dog that is used by agencies such as the Canada Border Services Agency to detect, let's say, illegal drugs or things like that. And another really important job that these dogs do, of course, is that they're really, really good at sniffing out explosives, which of course is something that terrorists use an awful lot of. So this is a kind of a good thing for man's best friend to do. I don't know anything about this at all, but I did find someone that I would like to introduce to you today. His name is Tom Abrahams. He is the owner of Black Tracks K9. He's a dog trainer in Ontario, Canada, and he knows a lot about this than I do. So, Tom, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hi, Phil. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Okay, let's go back to first principles, Tom. How did you get involved in this particular business in the first place? And by the way, is sniffer dog the correct term, or am I making this stuff up?
Well, sniffer dogs is, I guess, a layman's term. What it would be referred to as an explosive detection dog is what it would be referred to, or an EDD.
Okay. And how did you get involved?
So my last job was at the Toronto International Airport, doing exactly what you said, using a dog to detect for explosives. But, my story doesn't start there. My story goes way, 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 way back when. So depending on how you want to go about the interview, we can start from the beginning, or I can just answer the questions you have for me.
Let's go right back to day one, Tom, and how it is that you find yourself now in September of 2020 training these explosive detection dogs. I'm just going to your website now on the services that you offer. They're both for businesses and for families. So, yeah, let my listeners know how this started in the first place.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to go way back, all the way back to 1975. 1975 is when my parents, who moved to Guelph, had the idea to buy a family dog, which happens to be a German Shepherd. And it also happens to be a farm 3 doors down from where I reside today. Where they bought this dog from was a gentleman who had emigrated from Germany, brought a couple of dogs over and had a litter of pups. And lo and behold, long story short, my parents ended up buying one of those puppies. However, this young pup grew up and became a family member in more ways than one. He took his protection business very seriously, and to make a long story short, my dad ended up in court, in civil court, because the dog had bit all but one person that happened to be a policeman's daughter, and that dog ended up with the local police force. But that's when I fell in love with the breed and the dog, and that's where my career started. So that's a little bit of background, on how I got introduced to the dog, so on and so forth. From there, I always pursued dog training, especially with German Shepherds. However, in Canada, unfortunately, there's nothing official for canines as a civilian. In the sense, unless you're a police handler, there is really nothing that anyone can do on an official level to become certified or to have their dog certified as such here in Canada. So I continued with my dog training and bought a dog for my family and continued to train the dogs in hopes of one day being able to use my dog on an official level. I pursued an RCMP officer about 15 years ago who was the canine handler, and his itinerary was that of our Prime Minister. So his job was, what I thought was one of the coolest jobs in the world. He would sweep the hotels or meeting rooms wherever our Prime Minister at the time would have a meeting to ensure that there were no bombs on board.
Well, that's so cool. What a great job.
Yes, it was a great job. So anyways, I pursued this gentleman to try and have a meeting with him, and to me it was an icon and a legend to, sit down with a canine handler of that status, and it took me 2 years, but I finally got to it. And we sat down, we met, I asked him as many questions as possible, and from there, he referred me to a couple of books I could read, and so I did that, and kept on my pursuit. Phil, at any point, if you'd like to jump in and ask a question or whatever, please feel free to interject at any point.
Sure. Well, you get an A plus for persistence, if nothing else, Tom. And you mentioned German Shepherds. I owned a Shepherd as well, many, many years ago when I first moved to Ottawa. They are an absolutely spectacular, beautiful breed of dog. And is there anything that you find in particular about German Shepherds that seem to be, I don't know if I call it the dog of choice that is used in this regard? I mean, can any dog become an explosive detection dog?
So I guess that's a two-part question. It's a great question. German Shepherds, the reason why Shepherds are used today and all over the world, and RCMP still uses exclusively German Shepherds, is a German Shepherd scores high on the bar graph from A to Z. Not only is he a good sniffer, he's also a courageous dog. Not only is he a courageous dog, he's a great tracker. Not only is he a great tracker, but he's also a social dog. So, you can get a dog that's just a great sniffer, period, but then on the bar graph for everything else, he doesn't score so high. On average, a German Shepherd scores very high on the entire bar graph, if you can kind of envision that.
Interesting. So they're really, German Shepherds, I guess, like we all know that dogs have an amazing sense of smell, but German Shepherds, in addition to that, they have all the other attributes you already just talked about.
Exactly. And, going way back to World War I, so on and so forth, dogs were bred in Europe and were used exclusively to fight wars and to find explosives. And, with that, we continued that legacy in North America and understood the importance of dogs. And the dogs have just never left the scene to date.
So walk me through, Tom. You're given a dog to train. How do you actually train a dog who, again, has this natural ability to smell things really well? How do you channel that dog's ability into being useful for us as humans in detecting explosives or drugs, whatever? Like, what does the process look like?
So basically the process is, they're referred to as green dogs. Green dogs are dogs that have not been trained but have the natural instincts that, normally police or military departments are looking for. So some of those instincts would be, the interest or the curiosity to find an object or an article. So, a couple of the basic tests that are done are you would take a ball or a Kong and you'd hold the dog by your side and you would throw this ball or Kong into a bush, and then you'd release the dog. And as long as the dog stays searching, he has what we refer to as a good hunt drive.
Okay.
That's one of the key things that we're looking for. The other aspects that we're looking for are dogs who are socially neutral. When I say socially neutral, they shouldn't be scared of anything, yet they shouldn't be aggressive towards a large crowd of people. Because the dogs, as as police dogs enter schools and high schools, and they need to have a very good, steady nerve base in order to pursue and be accomplished in the tasks and jobs that they're asked to do. Because a lot of times, if a dog is chasing a bad guy, maybe through a warehouse, maybe on slippery floors, maybe in the dark. So we need to know way ahead of time that the dog is genetically good with all this stuff before we go into specific training.
Wow, this is absolutely fascinating. This is a completely new area for me. Tom, given that this podcast is largely about counterterrorism and terrorism, can you sort of walk us through the role you see that these dogs playing as instruments of counterterrorism?
Yeah, absolutely. Counterterrorism, dogs have been used for so many years to send bombs in airports and aerodromes and bus terminals and so on and so forth. And as this is a much bigger problem in the United States, and that's why the states have used dogs and are currently using dogs. We have very sophisticated machines, referred to as Saber 4000 machines that detect vapes that come off, a live bomb. But even with those highly sophisticated machines, through all the testing that we've done, and through the TSA, Transport Safety Authority, the FBI, the RCMP, it's still known that dogs have a more acute sense and are able to pick up more minor amounts of explosives than any machine can detect. So, just the sheer fact that a dog is available and is a deterrent when people see a dog, that itself, plays a real good role in warding off would-be bad guy terrorists.
I think that's a really good point, right? You do see the dog being let on a leash, whereas you wouldn't see the technology. It might be sitting in a room somewhere or whatever. And the point you also made, Tom, that despite the advances in artificial intelligence and technology, is that even as of 2020, nothing beats a dog's nose and a dog's olfactory system for sniffing out bad things. That's such an interesting aspect to this.
No, absolutely. And when I was working the dogs at the airport, there's certain terminals that we would be searching the dogs, and as they exercise, the explosives would get hid without us knowing where the explosives were. And we were often told that it was maybe it was on the counters or close to where the ticket agents stand. So naturally, your human mind wants to check everything that the ticket agent would be standing or be used to. But sometimes we were thrown, a curveball, and the explosives would be hidden in a pillar close to the ticket agent, as opposed to his actual booth or her booth. And the dogs never failed. They would pull us towards that pole and give us a sit or an indication or whatever it was. And it was always amazing, even to this day, as a handler for 34 years, how trusting a dog is to pick up that scent.
So when the dog actually detects the substance that you're asking it to do, what is it trained to do at that point, Tom? Is it indicated? Does it set? Walk us through what the dog has actually been trained to do to tell the handler, hey, guess what? I just found something.
Right. So, without getting too technical, there's two basic indications that a dog will give you. One is referred to as an alert, and that's basically the handler recognizes that his dog's body movement has changed from his regular movement. Maybe his tail starts wagging stronger. Maybe he becomes much more keen on the area he's in. And the final indication is what we refer to as a silent indication. So being an explosive detection dog, not wanting to cause chaos within a crowd of people, the dog is trained to either sit silently, lay down, or point. Pointing dogs or hunting dogs that normally point to flush out birds from the field.
Right. So
either three of these indications are used specific to explosive detection dogs.
You mentioned sort of the role of the handler. So I'm going to assume, knowing nothing about this, that the relationship between the handler and the dog is critical. The handler will know, as you said, when the dog's behavior shifts, and that's the dog saying to the handler, hey, buddy, you asked me to do this. Well, I'm telling you what's happening right now. So is it normal in this business, Tom, for one handler to be paired with one dog, or is the dog passed around, or does a guy handle several dogs? What's the best practice in this regard?
Yeah, so no, that's a great question, Phil. So the best practice in this regard is is definitely one dog and one handler. However, being the commercial business, this isn't always the ideal situation. Especially when talking about security companies. It's sometimes unfortunate that a handler has to be swapped out for whatever reason. But in order to get the best performance from your canine, it's best, as you say, that one handler and one dog stick together as long as possible. One, because you build a bond, and once you build a bond, you can trust your dog. And second, that handler gets to read the dog's specific body language and understand what that dog is doing and how he's doing it. And third, the dog knows exactly from the handler's movements what it is that the handler expects the dog to do.
Okay. Now, in a perfect situation, then, Tom, how long would this relationship last for? In other words, what is the working life of a explosive detection dog? Is it a lot of years, or does it get to a point where, as a dog ages, its ability decreases or becomes hard for the dog to do? What's the best case scenario there?
Right. So, a little bit different depending on which part of the globe you point to, but typically in North America, a dog generally stays in service for about 5 to 7 years. However, if the dog shows lack of interest, in year 3 or year 4, the dog will be pulled. And, it should be noted that the dogs are tested on a regular monthly basis to make sure that they're up to snuff and know their job inside and out.
On a monthly basis. So they have their performance appraisal every month then?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, of course, logged and recorded so that, these recordings can be checked for various reasons.
Wow, I'm glad that when I worked at CSIS, they weren't checking my performance every month. I'm not sure I would have been up to speed. Without going into too many details that might be sensitive, Tom, can you give us an example of a case that you worked on where there was a dog that you were handling and you end up succeeding in something really important, like a major bust or something like that?
Well, to be honest, truth is, I wish I had a major, quote unquote, major bust story to tell you. But one that comes to mind is I was once part of a government rehab program where prisoners who were sentenced to a federal sentence were given an opportunity to come out and integrate within society. So they were placed in what I refer to as a halfway home.
Right.
However, their time there was monitored. Everything that they said and did and went, it was all obviously very detailed. So part of that was zero tolerance for drugs or alcohol. So I was there for my first search with a drug dog, and I'm going to say about the fourth room in, the room was as messy as a junkyard, and my dog went to an old hockey bag that was filled with dirty clothes, and at the bottom of this bag was a Ziploc bag with a very, very, very old joint at the time. And my dog indicated on that joint, which honestly really surprised me. And unfortunately for that individual, he failed out the program. And as far as I know, he was sent back to the federal penitentiary.
Well, I really feel for your dog, because if that hockey bag's anything like my hockey bag, that dog deserved every treat in the world, because my hockey bag really stinks. Tom, I came across a story recently that really kind of caught my eye. And this was apparently the government over in Finland is trying to use dogs to sniff out COVID-19. And I didn't quite understand what the article was saying. What would that mean for a dog to sniff out COVID-19?
So it's, I think a lot of times we complicate the dog world. Dogs are very basic creatures, and they've had these innate abilities that we as humans, because our thinking is so much higher on a level than anybody else, that, we seem to overcomplicate things. But basically put, anything that has whether it's a piece of furniture, a cell phone, or a person who's sick, the dog has the ability to distinguish that scent. As an example, when you or me walk into McDonald's, we may scent 2 or 3 different things. We may smell, maybe may smell burgers, and maybe one other thing. When a dog walks into McDonald's, he smells 10 or 12 different scents all separately. So that's the beauty and that's the difference with the canine world is they have the ability to sense the different scents and vibrations and energies unlike human beings.
Oh, that's so cool. What an interesting sort of twist on the use of a dog to help in a, I would say obviously an emergency situation. It's not drugs and it's not explosives, but I mean, COVID-19 is a pretty explosive thing as well. And to use dogs to further our ability to detect people before they can affect others is a really interesting, I think, adaptation for what is a very, very old profession. As you said, it dates back decades.
Yes, absolutely. One thing that has been very, very, I'm going to say a blessing to my life, Phil, is the doors that dogs have opened up for me. One such blessing is, about 11 years ago, I was looking to place a dog with the Canadian Correctional Facility. And at the time, the church that I was going to in Cambridge, a friend of mine worked at a large facility out in Godrich. And so I inquired of him and I said, listen, do you guys have security? Do you have canines? Dogs can send out cell phones, drugs, weapons, so on and so forth. Would this be something that the institution would be interested in? So he said, well, leave it with me. Let me check and see, if they would be. And sure enough, he got back to me. And he happened to be the chaplain of the institution. So he had arranged for me to come out there and provide what I refer to as a dog demonstration to not only his supervisors, but to the youth that were incarcerated within the facility. So this was my very first dog demonstration. I went out there. I was nervous as all heck. There was about 225 people in the audience watching me do the disciplines with the dog. And anyway, once I was done with all the disciplines, these young men who were incarcerated had many, many questions for me. Without a word of lie, Phil, I thought that they were all previous dog handlers because the questions were very, very well thought out questions. Of course, they were a lot of them were criminally based. If I'm running through the lose my scent, so on and so forth. So without giving away too many trade secrets, I was able to connect with these young men, and I understood that. I thought to myself, wow, these young guys would really make good dog handlers if they were ever given the opportunity. So anyway, long story short, I drove home that day. Godrich is a bit of a drive from Guelph to Godrich, and I just within me, I really resonated with those young people. When I called back to see if they'd be interested in putting a dog into their program, they said, well, it's not part of the budget this year, Tom, but the young guys are still talking about your dogs and the performance, and they'd like you to come back on a voluntary basis and do some mentoring with your dog. Again, long story short, that was about maybe 11 to 13 years ago, and to this day we visit dogs that are being trained for various disciplines to these jails with these young men. And what we're trying to do is spark some initiative on their part and give them some hope and let them know that, they have a lot of talent and gifts. It's just sometimes not always using the right channel. And once they put it to use, then, good things will come of that.
Oh, that is really a very heartwarming story. I'm glad you shared that one, Tom. It reminds me, that we often use, dogs are often seen as companions for older people who are alone. And it's amazing what a dog can bring to a person's life. And in your case, it showed that maybe there's some hope for people who'd gone astray, broken the law and as a result had to be incarcerated for a bit. So that's a great story. I'm so glad you thought of that when I asked you the question.
Right. No, now, initially, to me, the outcome was not positive because I was there on business reasons to, get this program going and possibly sell the institution 3 or 4 dogs. But looking back at it, I wouldn't have it any other way because not only has it been, I'm hoping an inspiration to these young men, it's definitely been a blessing to me and my family to do that volunteer work.
Oh, that's great. Listen, Tom, I want to give you the chance to let my listeners know how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in dog training or learning more about your business. So feel free to give my listeners as much information as they can on how to get a hold of you.
Sure. So, Phil, we run a business and it's referred to as Black Tracks Canine. So anybody can look that up. It's blacktrackscanine.ca. And what we do is we have two divisions within our business. One, we train dogs for government and government entities, whether it's the police department or search and rescue. And secondly, something that we've started in the past 5 or 7 years is selling dogs to individuals who are looking for a family protection dog, a dog that is good with kids, social, and yet gives them that sense of protection, for their home. And much to my surprise, that is a world on its own. And I've met some very, very interesting people to date in regards to personal family protection dogs. So again, I thank you for the plug, and it's Black Tracks Canine is the name of my business.
Well, I'm certainly going to put links to your website and to your Facebook page, Tom. Listen, this has been an absolutely delight hearing from you. It's a very inspiring story, and I always thought I had the coolest job working in intelligence for 30 years. I think you may have just taught me in terms of an interesting career. So listen, Tom, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the podcast and sharing your information about what some might say is a bit of a peripheral look at terrorism. But as you said, dogs have done an incredible job at helping law enforcement and the military do their jobs better. So I'm really glad you took the time to come on, Tom.
Phil, again, thanks so much for the opportunity. I certainly had a great time, and thank you for allowing me to speak my part.
My pleasure. So that was my talk with Tom Abrahams from K9 Training. What do you think? I'd love to hear what you thought of this podcast. A little bit off the beaten path from what I normally do, but give me your feedback. You can reach me on email, borealisrisk@gmail.com, or on Twitter @BorealisSaves. You'll also find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn. If you like the content and want to receive more, go to my website, borealisthreatandrisk.com. Hit the subscribe button, provide your email address. You'll get a free daily access to all the podcasts, blogs, etc. in the form of an email to your inbox every single morning. Love to hear what you thought of this podcast or others. Maybe some ideas for future ones. I'll talk to you again soon. Until then, stay safe.